Alrighty, folks. Hello and welcome to Getting in Trouble with John Theodore. This is episode 5. We've got Hot Sauce Boss on the phone. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing good. Just came back from the NIS race. Did pretty well. So just glad to be talking to you.
Good deal, man. So, where run down again? What happened? How'd you finish? What were the highlights or lowlights, as it were?
Uh, I didn't qualify, so I started 32nd. I just wanted to take it easy early in the race, and you know how it is in the back sometimes. A lot of people don't want to take it easy, and I was getting dive bombed in the corner, and so I was just trying to take it easy. Got caught up in a wreck. Two cars got together in front of me, and with the wall, I don't know if it's a glitch or whatnot, but he just stopped, and I just ran into the back of him and gave me about 3 minutes of damage, and spent the rest of the race getting that fixed with my wrecks, and I'm 11th, so I'm happy with it.
11th place after getting wrecked is definitely not bad. Yeah, there are definitely some sticky spots on the walls where the car hits the seam just right or something like that. It'll definitely just bring them to a dead stop immediately. Hopefully they the hope is my hope is that when the new damage model comes down, whenever it does, one of the things with that is that they're redoing all of the collision maps on all the trackside objects, the cars, everything like that. So hopefully it'll smooth out some of those harsh edges, and I don't know if it's possible and with the way that collisions rendered on current game engines to get all of that stuff out, but it would definitely help. Hopefully, with what they're talking about, it's not just a make the damage look cooler. They're actually redoing, from a coding perspective, how collision works.
Yeah,
So
my big thing is I hope they get rid of netcode, or at least limit it to a small amount.
yeah, netcode was a theme of the day on my race for sure. Um, let's see, I qualified 5th. Dropped back to 7th on the start. I was pretty slow on the start, but then took care of my tires. I was the fastest car on the track, lap 35, 40, 50. And then I decided to come in and pit on lap 50, which is always a mistake because you pit, you come back out 15 laps later, the caution comes out, got pinned a lap down. Then I spent a huge chunk of the race trying to get that lap back. And while I was in the battle for the lucky dog, I had netcode with the 32 car. There was like a full car width between our cars when I went back and looked at it on the replay. In the game, it looked like he just jumped up and hit me, and it seemed like I'd also like had 2 corners in a row where he was sending it in there and then pushing way up the track right towards me. So it was like I was already frustrated with that point. So
Yeah,
sounded let him know what I thought of that move, and then in the next corner I go in. I had a run. I was trying to get back at it and start trying to work back on all the positions that I lost, and I pushed up on a guy who was also coming back down, but there was no contact there. But the net code wasn't nearly as big. We may have hit anyway, but that caused a wreck, put the caution out, and then we were finally able to get a waiver round. I don't think it was on that caution, but on the next one. Got back on the lead lap with I don't know, maybe 90 or something laps to go. Definitely not where we could make it on fuel to the end. But this time I decided to stay out, and the caution came out with only about 11 of us, 10 or 11 of us still on the lead lap. And I was able to go from 10th to 8th on the final run, finished 8th. So salvaged something from it.
no, that's good, man.
Yeah, it was definitely a tough race, though.
Yeah, how smooth did your all's race run? Like as far as cautions?
We had a number of good, like I said, we had 2 runs that were over 50 laps in length where green flag pit stops played into it, but they didn't go the full 75 where you get a full fuel run where everyone has to pit. So that kind of messed up a lot of folks' races. It definitely
Yeah,
required strategy definitely came into it where the strategy of staying out and running your tank dry was the right call because wrecks ended up coming out, and it was usually the guys who were staying out so late on those older tires. It just got to a point where I guess they couldn't quite handle the car and lost it and brought out cautions both times. First one was right in front of me too. I was able to get around it. But like he lost it coming off 4, and then he's trying to save it wiggling in front of him. I'm like, just don't wreck me. I was able to slip by on the outside. So
Yeah.
tough race.
There was one wreck I had to avoid, and it was all up high. So I was like, I'm gonna go down low. And then as I was going down low, I was like, this is a self cleaning track. This wreck is coming down towards me. So I just came to a complete stop.
Mm-hmm.
So that scared me a little bit. I know there was some controversy in my race. We had like 13 yellows. I think our longest green flag run was like 25 laps. It was awful.
Which split were you in? Do you know?
Top split.
Oh, you guys were top split. Wow.
Yeah, and there was some controversy at the end. There was a lap car that came off the apron and just wiped out Busa.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, so they were arguing about that. It was. Yeah,
I bet.
It got heated there towards the end.
I bet Busa was hot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it was nuts.
So what's your I rating now? And what's your name on iRacing?
My name on iRacing is David Wiseheart.
Oh, okay.
My I rating is 4312.
Good deal. Yeah, I was up there at that level briefly. I think my highest I ever got it to is 4400, and then I hit one of those streaks where I got caught up in wrecks, and then it's just like it's been hovering like right around 4000. That is a tough barrier to break through for sure.
Yeah, I got up to 40. I got just barely over 4500 for like 2 races, and Talladega week happened. So, that was like last year or something like that, like last October. So I haven't been able to recover it since.
Talladega week wasn't like so. This past Talladega week, it wasn't even Talladega that was so bad for me. It was Homestead. Interestingly enough, in the National Series car, I had the first 2 races I did at Homestead. One of them was a guy got into the outside wall, pulled it off the wall right down into me, and then the next one, I put myself into the outside wall and Alt F4'd out of that. So those 2 races cost me a ton of I rating, and then getting dead last in NIS fix certainly didn't help. But it was basically those 3 races cost me like 300 I rating, and then I've just, couple bad races at Bristol, but I got a good one, and it's just been tough. The wrecks just keep seeming to find me, so I think I need to do more pre-race meditation or in-race meditation. Let the Zen flow.
It's hard when those streaks happen, but you got to know that you just have to tell yourself that it's not always going to be like this. You got to kind of fight through that streak.
Yeah, for sure. So let's see, NASCAR topics. What do you think about the change back to single car qualifying?
I love it. I am not a fan of this package. I hate the package. It has produced some interesting racing. I will give it that.
Mm-hmm.
But this was just the only way. I know they tried to make that group qualifying work, and it was, fun while it lasted with the old package. But with draft being so important, it was impossible for NASCAR to not some sort of controversy every week.
Yeah, exactly. Let me see. By the way, do you mind? I'm gonna switch the on the phone thing to say, do you prefer David or Dave Wiseheart?
Doesn't matter to me, man.
All right. Well, which one do you go by?
People just call me David, so.
David Wiseheart? All right. So I'm going to do that.
I go by a bunch of different names. My family calls me DJ. Everybody at work calls me David.
It's H-A-R-T, right?
H-E-A-R-T.
H-E-A-R-T, okay. Or is there something else you would prefer to have it? I have it as Hot Sauce Boss, but...
Yeah, that's my name on there. It doesn't matter. You can put my name up there.
Well, you're Dave Wiseheart on Twitch, though, right?
Yeah, I'm David Wiseheart 4 on Twitch.
Okay, yeah. We'll do it as that, because I usually reference folks by the Twitch follower name in the chat. What's the story behind Hot Sauce Boss, though?
I love hot sauce. I love buffalo sauce. I eat buffalo wings. I know it's not healthy, but I probably eat buffalo wings 3 or 4 times a week. Just love.
Healthier than
I love 17
cheeseburgers.
different buffalo sauces.
Tell,
So
well, at least buffalo wings are probably a little bit healthier than cheeseburgers, right?
yeah, oh yeah. But something I've been. It's been ever since really I was in high school. It's just I just love buffalo wings, man.
Have you seen that? There's that YouTube channel where they do like, what is it, 4 or 7 different times of escalating degrees of hot sauce, and then they'll have a guest on that.
Oh yeah, first we feast or whatever it is with
Yeah, exactly.
that. Yeah, yep. I watch that from time to time if I'm just on YouTube and I'll scroll through it and get caught in that circle.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I enjoy that. It's a lot of fun. Um, so yeah, Hot Ones. That's what it is. I saw the
Yeah,
one with Neil deGrasse Tyson. He did a pretty good job withstanding the heat, honestly. That
yeah.
was
I think it's the Alton Brown one where he grades them on their like texture or their taste, and he picks out the ingredients and he tells uh, which ones he picked and what he would put in it to make it better.
yeah. That'd be fun to do sometime. I like a good hot sauce. I'm not big on the ones that burn your face off. I like it's more about flavor for me than just raw heat.
Yeah, I if it's so hot that after a couple bites I can't taste anything, it's too hot.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with that. I had I was last week when I was off for a few days. I was at a conference down in Austin, Texas, and they had a thing there where they brought some food trucks. They had this one food truck that had it was a really spicy taco with, I think it was like Jamaican style jerk chicken and jalapenos and stuff. Just and whatever they had in the sauce was super hot. It was really good, ton of good flavor, but it was this heat that like you take a bite and you're like, oh man, that's good, and then it's just like it feels like there are little fire ants crawling all around on your tongue afterwards, and it's like unless you like douse it in milk right away, it just keeps burning for a while.
Yeah, and me and my sister we actually bought that. What's it? It's like the Coco Loco box. It's like that chocolate square that's supposed to be really hot that's infused with like the Carolina Reaper.
Oh yeah,
And we bought that. We were gonna do it, and then I was reading about it, and the spice in the mouth is not my. It's what I've heard about it getting into your stomach, and for like a day straight, it feels like you're just having stomach cramps, and I'm like, I don't want to deal with that.
yeah, man, definitely not. Firefighter, by the way, says that I need to try the Carolina Reaper sauce when I come to North Carolina, so we'll see about that. Um, and then have you ever seen on the I think it's saucy ones? They've got those like hot sauce or the fiery like candies and stuff like that where people try to do the challenge where they hold it in it's like a lollipop, but it's basically like a massive red hot, and they try to hold that in their mouth for as long as possible. That is not appealing to me at all.
Yeah, I think it's called the Toe of Satan or something like
Something
that.
like that, yeah.
And
There's
it's just
probably a few companies that have it branded with different names, but it's probably the same type of deal.
yeah, it's whatever chemical is in like buffalo sauce, or whatever, to make it hot, or whatever chemical they infuse with these peppers.
Mm-hmm.
It's just pure. That's all it is. So it's just, and it's like an instantaneous hot, and it just lasts forever.
Yeah. No, no, thank you on that. I do. That's not something that I really need in my life.
Yeah, no, not really, not for me either.
Yeah. Um. So let's see. So we're before we got on that, we were talking about the package. I'm not a huge fan of the 2019 rules package either. I've been pretty vocal on that. Actually, at Dover, it didn't work too bad. It was the cars did feel well. It was tighter overall, but it was kind of nice not having them try to murder you coming off turn four every lap.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, I did think that last year they maybe went a little bit too far with shaving too much off of the rear spoiler. That's not really the end of the car that they needed to be working on, in my opinion. It's I want to see them get rid of the splitter and then change the rules on the shock package to it that don't allow them to make coil bound setups. Would be the
Yeah,
direction that I want to go. Go back to an air dam and then don't allow the teams to do the things that they do that make the setups coil bound. Don't allow them to twist the cars so that they're skewed or anything like that. I it, the way that my perspective coming from is it's like this is no longer a it's no longer a car show where Chevy and Ford are showing off the best things that they can make with the intent of selling stuff in the showroom on Monday, right? That's just not the business model anymore, really, for most forms of racing. Obviously, when you're looking at like IMSA and WEC and things like that with the sports cars, there's a little bit more correlation between the car that you see on track and what's selling in the showroom. But
yeah,
it's no longer the case for NASCAR. So the thing is that I really do look at racing as a sport, and with that in mind, the equipment, which is the car, should be somewhat standardized in my opinion. And once we're already basically there, we've already got so many rules and things like that that are restricting what they can and can't do with the race cars anyway. I
yeah,
just think that they should set them up so that NASCAR dictates a rules package that does that's difficult to drive and challenging to drive, has some measure of equality with it in terms of you know horsepower and things like that, but you give the teams a decent amount of tools to set up and tweak it to the driver's preference, and you let them go out and race that. So, basically, similar concept to IROC, where it really is more spec racing, and the equipment is equal, but then it's the teams that come in and facilitate it. I think would be a better direction to go. You don't have the Yankees going out and buying better bats or better gloves than the Cardinals have in baseball, and you don't have the cleats, the pads, the helmets, and stuff like that in football and soccer and whatever. It's like it's the players that people come to see. So I want to when I go to the track, I want to see the racers differentiate themselves in similar equipment, and I want to see the teams on pit road be the differentiating factor, the communication with the driver and the crew chief, all that. Um, but just being able to just raw outspend in R&D and tweak and perfect the thing in a wind tunnel isn't particularly interesting to me, because I'm not getting a behind the scenes look at all the science behind that. That would probably be interesting, but we're not privy to that. So it's just like all a whole lot of the stuff that determines who's going to be fast on Sunday happens in secrecy, and we don't see any of it. And then we end up seeing it just play out with you know what? I'm not really explaining it as best as I could, but I think I'm getting across the idea.
yeah. And I think another thing they could do too, if they want to, when they raise the car up and allow for more suspension travel, is I really think and I've heard Dale Jr. talk about where they need to narrow the tire. The grip patch on these tires are too wide.
I agree with that, especially if they're going to keep. It seems like the insistence on dropping the horsepower from like 900 to 750 to 550 is coming from the OEMs, and as much as anything else, they want a lower price point that they can develop for.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, you definitely need to narrow up the tires and reduce the contact packs if you're going to go that way. Now, that said, I don't necessarily want them racing on bicycle tires. I think that would look pretty silly, but they could probably do some things where they narrow up the car a little bit as well, and then narrow up the tires that would probably make it a little bit better. We should be getting the Gen 7 not next year, but the year after, I think, right? Or they're talking about maybe delaying it an additional year.
I've heard that it's right now it's still playing 2021, but I've heard from other people and sources that there's a possibility it could get delayed. But if it does get delayed a year, I would rather them delay it a year than rush it out and it be a bad product.
Yeah, get it right this time. Like let's not rush things. Let's get the package right. But I would also be okay with release it as something better and then continue to tweak on iterate on it through the 21 season to have something really good for 2022.
Yeah,
I wish they were doing that with 2020. I wish they were saying this clearly isn't working. Let's start working on it with 2020. Let's give them an experimental package and use 2020 as a test year, and then have something a lot better for 2021 and 2022. But
yeah, I feel like they should have been working on the Gen 7 car a couple years ago instead of
yeah,
just now. At some point when you got to change the aero package every season, you know yourself it's not working.
right. And I
So
think they have been working on the Gen 7 thing. It's just that these packages do take a long time to do. I mean, it took them a long. How many years was it that they were? Because they were started working on the car tomorrow, which is what the Gen 5 was called back 2002, 2003, I think, if I remember correctly. It was not long after Dale's accident that they started working on that, and we didn't see it on the track until 2007. So that was a 4 or 5 year project, at
yeah,
least, probably longer than that.
yeah,
Um,
and even
but
then they had to make improvements to it because they
hmm
started figuring out when cars got backwards, it created lift instead of downforce, and they were turning upside down.
right, that was because they slapped that, and that was the thing is that a lot of the problems we're dealing with this package, both Gen 5 and Gen 6, are things that that I honestly think they added to the car that had nothing to do with safety. Everything that they did that had a safety purpose was fine, but the wing was a disaster. That was what was causing them to flip upside down. The splitter's been a disaster. The shark fin looks goofy. I think that that's supposed to give them something, but like that's also been a contributing factor to the increased reliance on side force, I think, is that they gave them this big fin that goes along the back of the car that adds more that gives more surface area for side force, and also obviously because they flattened out the sides more, that gave a larger contact patch for the side force to become a bigger planet too.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, that X3, the Intimidator one mentioned in chat, the X3 car, that is definitely one that we've seen some concepts for, but that's not necessarily going to be the Gen 7 package. I think that's one possible direction that they go in. My worry with the X3 car from looking at it is that they're trying, rather than doing what we're talking about, which is set rules for shock packages that would require them to keep the cars up off the ground and basically prohibit them from being able to create a package that has them ride down on the bump stops with a coil bound setup. The X3 car addresses things a different way, where it basically makes a big hole in the front end of the car, and then so the sides are down, right, could be sealed down to the track, but there's a big hole in the front that's up and not sealed to the track. I am not a fan of that because I feel like the first thing that teams are going to figure out how to do when that comes out is set the cars up so low in the early part of the race that they're just grinding away at the sides of the car so that that centerpiece gets lower and lower and lower as the race goes on. We've seen them try some. We've seen them in the past, like they were literally scraping the wall. Carwell, thank you for the follow. They would literally scrape the wall in, I think it was Daytona qualifying and stuff, on their outlap to narrow up the car a little bit. That it, if teams can do stuff like that to get an advantage, they will. So I feel like the X3 car is, again, it's kind of coming at the problem from the wrong direction, in my opinion. I think that the problem is that they're riding on the bump stops. So that what they need to do, what in my opinion, what the best solution to that is, get them up off the bump stops. Don't cut a hole in the front end.
yeah, definitely. It's this car's got a lot of issues, and I feel like sometimes NASCAR wants to focus on one area, and
Mm-hmm.
it's a sum of all the parts is
Yeah.
creates what we have.
Apparently, though, we could be getting a look at some possible changes at this year's All Star race again. I do like that they've been using the All Star race as a way to test packages. I just wish that when it doesn't work, like what we saw last year, in my opinion, did not work. I did not like that race. I did not like NASCAR going in that direction, that they wouldn't go in that direction. It seems like they put it out there, and then they're all like, "Oh yeah, that's what we wanted. Sure, that's." And then they convince themselves that because they're already going in that direction, that they're just going to keep going that way.
I think the big issue with I think the reason NASCAR really started to really push in that direction is because a lot of the fans were like, "This race is great, it's exciting, it's entertaining." But what a lot of them were forgetting was that that race had no points on the line, and you were racing for $1 million, and that was it. You know, it wasn't going to be like that every week.
Well, so there's that, but also if what I remember of that race as well is that the cars looked visibly slow. They were all bunched up in a pack and doing, they were racing Charlotte like it was a draft track, which I didn't like, but that's also because it was a high grip. Charlotte's a higher grip track than Atlanta, than Auto Club, than some of the other bigger tracks that we've seen so far. So it's a higher grip track, and it was at night. I do think that when we see this package, like at Kansas, when we go to another high grip track at night, it may work similarly. The thing is that going into the corners, and especially as the tires wear, aero push is still a thing. And even in the All Star race last year, Kevin Harvick was basically he wasn't able to just up and run away from the field, but he stayed in front the entire race. He was able to go up, get the lead, and stay in front the entire race and manage about a second to a second and a half gap, if I remember correctly, which is kind of what we've seen with a lot of other races where, the lead car still gets an advantage and can run away. They just can't run away quite as fast as they used to be able to.
Yeah, see, I'm biased on that point because that's my driver. So, but yeah, you're still getting the same effect. Just the cars are closer together, in my opinion. You don't.
Right. But they're
I mean,
only they're only really bunched up and close together right on the restart. So you get the real, you get super exciting racing on fresh tires right on a restart for like 2 laps, and then everything strings out and they can't pass, and you've got the aero push and everything just like we had before last year that everyone was complaining about. Which honestly, especially once we got into the summer months last year and we started getting tracks that were a little bit slicker, I thought last year's package produced some fantastic racing.
yeah,
Um,
I did too.
I'm going through the summer months. I'm like, why are we changing this, guys? This stuff is awesome.
Yeah, the Chicago race was the best race of the year. I mean, even the finish.
Mm-hmm.
It had pretty much everything you wanted. I think that was the best, in my opinion, or close to the best that last year's package was going to bring you. But I think the problem with last year's package, it required a specific set of circumstances and weather for it to really play out that way.
Yeah, but I think that's the thing is I think this one is kind of in the same boat where if you have really cool weather and nighttime conditions and a high grip track, you can end up with the draft track scenario. And
Yeah,
I do like the tapered spacer and the bigger spoiler at Daytona and Talladega. I thought that was one of the best Talladega races we've seen in a long time. So I like
yeah,
this. I like this as an alternative to the restrictor plate
yeah.
race.
I do not want them to change it though because I have a fear that with Larson getting upside down and getting airborne, they are going to make knee jerk reactions to it. And if it happens on a consistent, happens one more time this year, then I'd look at it. But in my opinion, I wouldn't change anything about it.
Larson's wreck didn't look all that different to me than Kenseth's wreck 3 years ago.
No,
Like, it's the bottom line is that when cars are going over airplane takeoff speed, they're going to be capable of getting up and airborne and turning over under the right circumstances.
yeah,
Um, and it's like, if I'm being real, the NASCAR uses that as a big part of their marketing materials. If you watch the promo videos for Talladega, it's all big wrecks and cars turning over. So
Yeah.
does NASCAR actually not want the cars to turn over? If I'm being real, I don't think so. I think that they want the drivers to remain safe when the cars roll over, but I don't actually think that NASCAR's marketing folks or any of the tracks actually want to go to want the cars to never turn over again. The big wrecks are part of the visual spectacle of the sport, and that's where you get a lot of the drama and you get the visual impact and stuff like that. Real race fans obviously watch for good real racing, but the thing is that if you make it so tame that every time a car gets sideways, that you just have the car turn into a giant air brake and have it slow down without hitting anything, you've kind of taken away a big part of the spectacle that is auto racing. So I want cars crashing in a safe manner, but I don't want them to never crash, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. Like, and if I'm being honest as well, from time, I mean, I watch racing for good racing. I would much rather watch good racing than crashes all day long. I think if
Mm-hmm.
you watch NASCAR for crashes, you're not a real fan. But every now and then, I like to see a good crash or a good flip. I don't ever want a driver to be hurt. I wouldn't wish that on my worst enemy. But I also think when you have crashes like that, it reminds the fans, the sanctioning body, and even the drivers to an extent that this is always a dangerous sport. You can never eliminate 100% of the danger about the sport.
Right, and the other thing is that crashes do convey, or it when things go wrong, you know, you see the actual effect of the speeds that they're doing. Because when they're just going around in circles and you've got the camera that's tracking with them, you often lose a sense of how fast the cars are actually going. When they get sideways in trouble and hit a wall, and turn over, that's when you really get to see the um, the big difference in speed. That's how speed is communicated, is that you see the car hit and things just blow and fly off everywhere. The car goes tumbling over and over and over again as it dissipates speed. That's really where you get the communication of speed. You get the communication that the cars are actually difficult to drive, and that's the other issue that I think is a big problem with the 2019 rules package, is that the cars are just much easier to drive than they were. We were just talking about even at Dover, where we had the 750 horsepower, but with the bigger aero, that car in the race today was much easier to drive than what it was last year. You and I think we're both in agreement on that.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And I mean, I thought it was fun to drive though. I think that Dover's been fun to drive this week. But it is not as difficult to drive around Dover with speed and not wreck. It used to be a lot harder to get the speed that you need to make competitive lap time while keeping the thing straight.
Yeah, I'm in complete agreement with that.
Um, but yeah, I do think that all that said, I do think that moving to single car qualifying was a good move. And I think that single car qualifying is where NASCAR that works better for NASCAR. That works better for oval racing. Having one car out there, not getting any assistance or impediment from any other cars on the track, go out there and set the lap. I think that's a good, fair way to set the field. I think that group qualifying works very well for Formula One, where you only have 20 cars, and where, because of how difficult it is to pass on road courses with cars that have that much aero, that the starting position matters a whole lot more in terms of, if you've got two cars that are roughly equivalent, the one that starts in front of the other one has a huge advantage going into the race. So qualifying really is kind of the start for Formula One, and NASCAR was trying to extend their weekend in a similar way, where they made qualifying super interesting. The problem is that it's so easy to shuffle spots through the field as the race goes on. Qualifying and the race is so long, qualifying just doesn't mean as much in NASCAR as it does in Formula One.
Yeah, and I agree with that as well. But I watched the qualifying yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
and I was fully entertained by it. They had the because I know a lot of people. It's less entertaining. It's not as fun to watch, but I mean, I enjoyed it. I mean, they had a ghost car up there that you could track, and they had more time to explain things and go over why this person's run. You know, where he lost time and how he lost. You know, to me, that's interesting. Um,
Exactly. I mean, NASCAR qualifying is for the hardcore fan. It's not for casual fans. You're not getting casual fans in on no matter what the format is for qualifying. Unless you do a demolition derby, last car survives, then you might get some in, but that's a totally different deal. But yeah, I agree with you. Single car qualifying gives a little bit more breadth, where you get your expert commentators in there. You know, you got DW and Jeff Gordon in the booth. They're able to really talk in detail about. I remember DW back in the day when DW was really in his heyday as an announcer,
mhm.
talking about and looking at each individual cars they came by, about how they were traveling through the corner, how the air dam was looking, you know, in terms of getting it sealed off or just level. You know, there would be some cars where it was a little bit crooked on one side or another, and he was talking about how that car doesn't look so fast to me, and then, you know, how the drivers who looked really smooth and didn't necessarily look as dramatic, those are the ones he was looking at as having real auto speed. It connected a lot of dots for me as a race fan, watching that and having that explained in greater detail. And I think that's the thing is, you know, the race is the big show. That's where you're bringing fans in, and the highlight reel is your big show. That's where you're bringing new fans in. Once you've got fans, then give them that extra layer of detail of content when they're ready for it. Qualifying and practice are those things where you talk about the technical aspects in more detail, and also you get to see all the cars on TV. Everyone gets a little bit of TV time when they do their run. And as you're also talking about with the darkfish and stuff like that, and being able to do the car overlays now, that makes the visual product of single car qualifying much better than it used to be.
No, yeah, definitely. I think we agree by almost 100% about
Mm-hmm.
this single car qualifying. It's just I was thoroughly entertained by it,
Yeah.
and I hope everybody else was.
GDM, the only qualifying we watched this year was for the 500. Yeah, I mean Daytona 500 qualifying is a totally different deal, just like Indy 500 qualifying is a totally different deal, which I am looking forward to Indy 500 qualifying. But I wouldn't want them to do 4 laps and do the Indy 500 style qualifying at every track either. Having a separate, having a little bit different rules that make a bigger deal out of it for your marquee events, I think makes sense. Jeff 9219. What if NASCAR ran a pole shuffle after single car qualifying? Kind of like, I think he's talking about kind of like the Fast 9 deal that they do with Indy. I don't know. I'm I'd be fine with that, but I'm fine with not having it too. I guess basically is my thing is I just don't care that much about qualifying. What are your thoughts on that one?
Um, I think some of those suggestions. I mean, I think in theory they're great, but I think a lot of this decision by NASCAR is to get back to the simplistics of it all. And it's easy. A single car qualifying is easy for everyone to understand for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of that for a fan that's coming in or a casual fan, they're going to look at like the pole shuffle or the way to do Indy 500 or whatever it is. It's just so complicated that they wouldn't understand it. So I like the simplicity of car qualifying as it is.
Agreed. So shifting gears a little bit, did you watch or have you been following at all the William Barr testimony before Congress this week?
I actually have not really. I've been quite busy. Me and my girlfriend just bought a house last week, so
Oh, good.
uh, we, thank you. And we've been
Congratulations on that.
thanks. And we've just been so busy. I haven't had any time to pay attention to it. I haven't been watching much TV or been on my phone much.
So let's talk about that though. Is this the first house that you've owned? Have you been doing the apartment renting thing before then?
Me and my girlfriend, we've been renting an apartment for 4 years, and we got 2 dogs.
Mm-hmm.
And we were like, you know what, we need to get a yard for them. I'm tired of. I feel like renting is just throwing my money away. I'd much rather own a house. And So this is our first house buying experience. So it's been a an adventure to say the least.
Yeah, the house that I'm living in now was that was my first one. That's my first one too. So took me until I was what about 32, I think, to buy my first house, and it was
Hmm.
all apartments before then. Although part of that was also I was living in Los Angeles, where it's, I mean, purchasing property there is just unrealistic in a
Yeah,
lot of
yeah,
ways. But
it's a lot better here.
yeah, I live in St. Louis now, and the property values are a lot cheaper here.
Yeah, I live
Um,
in the Louisville, Kentucky area. I live actually in Indiana. I'm right across the river from Louisville.
mm-hmm.
It's property. We moved out to the country, so it's even cheaper.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh,
But yeah, I mean, it's definitely tough though. Like the reality is that with the way that the economy works, it's really tough to get to a point. For folks in our generation, getting to that point where you can buy a house is definitely a lot harder than it used to be.
oh yeah,
Or at least it seems that way. It seems like it's harder than it was in my folks' generation, for
yeah.
sure.
It's easier to sell a house these days, though. I can tell you that much. It's wow. We were looking at houses because we don't have. I mean, we got a little bit of money. We don't have a ton,
Mm-hmm.
and then and the houses that were in our price range. I mean, they go up for sale, and 3 days later they were sold.
Same
I
with
mean,
me. Yeah, there was another one that I was looking at before this, and I was ready to put a bid in on it, and someone else got it. But at the time, it was still a pretty buyer-friendly market. It was just you had to be quick on pulling the trigger because if you didn't, someone else would.
yeah,
But no one was really ready to get in bidding wars either at the time.
that's how it was with the house we bought. It was up for sale for 2 days. We were actually looking at another house, and we were going to go to this house next. And our realtor got a call, and he was like, "There was an offer put in on it, so y'all can still come look at it, but y'all have to put in a bid today, and it has to be a strong offer." And we
Mm-hmm.
went and looked and put an offer in on it. And we were getting it the next day, and that house was up for 3 days when we bought it. So
Yeah, yeah. I know that
competitive.
the one that I ended up grabbing, I don't think it was on the market for too long either. But it was definitely, didn't I didn't try to undercut. I just kind of made them an offer at asking price, and they accepted it. And honestly, I feel like that's the ideal of how business should be done. The seller puts it up for a fair price. The buyer says, "Yep, I agree. That's a fair price." There you go, and you make a deal that way. The problem comes in when people on either side try to get more than what's really a fair deal advantaged on their
Yeah,
side. And then obviously especially it gets stickier from there.
yeah,
But and I do think that like I think that stuff works in things like in housing, in car sales when you're buying goods and services where you have the time and space to actually comparison shop and look around, right?
yeah,
It makes sense. I obviously it's still the center of debate, and it's really been a debate for, gosh, probably 20, 30 years going in this country, the healthcare question. And I think I really do firmly believe that isn't something, because when you're at the point where you actually need emergency healthcare and stuff like that, you're not really in a situation where you can comparison shop. You're kind of
yeah,
getting what you can get at the time, and also I'm not sure that there's a. I mean, most people are in most situations, like if you're getting your health care through your employer, you're not comparison shopping then either. Your employer has comparison shopped for you, and then here is the plan, take it or leave it. It's going to be a better deal than anything that you can get on the private market.
yeah,
So if there isn't meaningful difference in the product or any real measure of choice, it's not. I just feel like that products like that, especially when they're so essential to whether you live or die, it's not really the same kind of formula where free market economics and it's solely being in control of the private sector applies, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Which is why I think that whether we go to just having a public option or true single payer health care, I think we do need something where, I do think that it is an appropriate role of government to step in and provide health care as a service to their citizens. Most other developed countries already do that with much better results than we have here in America. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Um, I don't really know, man. I, I don't really buy into the notion of like what Bernie Sanders is saying. You know, uh, I watched I think a clip of his town hall. I don't remember what channel it was on.
He did the one
Uh,
on Fox News recently. Was it that one or was it the C? Because he's been doing them on.
I
He
think I
I think he's
I
done
think it
all
was
three networks now, or two
I
on
think it was
CNN and one on Fox.
I think it was on Fox. I seen
Mm-hmm.
it on my Facebook.
Yeah.
I don't watch a ton of news. Usually, my news comes through like articles and stuff on Google and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, uh, he was saying that the healthcare is going to be, you're not going to pay a monthly charge for it, but it'll be free when you use it. But man, I don't. I'm all in favor of lowering taxes, and I just think that the tax hike on the universal health care like that would be outrageous. I mean, you're still going to end up paying for it. Somebody's got to pay for it.
Right.
Uh,
But the thing is like
I,
if I'm okay with if I'm paying, using fake if I'm paying $3,000 a year for health insurance, and I instead pay $3,000 a year for more in taxes, and I'm getting the same thing, that's an even trade in my opinion. So it at the end of the day, it's $3,000 out. Whether it's going to a private company or the government to provide me health insurance doesn't really make a difference to me in that regard. Um,
for me, it all depends on how much you were paying in the first place.
right.
Uh, and if you're someone who uh, goes cheap with your health insurance, not cheap like that way, but you find somebody who doesn't an insurance company who doesn't charge quite as much, and then you get almost forced into paying those taxes for an insurance that maybe is a little maybe
But the
you can just
question,
barely buy.
the problem that comes with those insurance plans is that some of them, if you actually when you actually go in and need to use it, your insurance isn't actually there. They don't actually cover the things that they said they were going to cover or that you thought they were going to cover. So, when you find that out, it's too late.
Yeah, but and as much as I'm in favor of low government interference with certain things, and that's also on people to read the fine print on their insurance plans to know what they do and do not cover
Right.
before you buy insurance. So
But everyone isn't an insurance expert, and especially people who are the most vulnerable in terms of like the people who have the least amount of income or least education are least equipped to effectively comparison shop and compare plans. So they're the most vulnerable to being taken advantage of someone who's selling a product that would not accurately be defined as what a true health insurance plan is. Right? It's not wealthy people are getting taken advantage of with these, quote unquote catastrophe plans and stuff like that. It's poor folks, who don't have who are put in a box of either buying health insurance that they can't afford or buying health insurance that isn't really health insurance. It's not a good way to do it. And when at the end of the day, we all ended up paying for that anyway because when they get into an emergency situation and they're put into emergency rooms cannot refuse care. If you show up in an emergency room in a life or death situation, they have to take care of you. And if you don't have health insurance and your health insurance can't cover it, then that cost ends up getting passed along to everyone else through increasing the cost of medications, prescriptions, and care at hospitals because hospitals end up increasing the rates on all the other care that they provide in order to offset the hit that they take on their balance books when they take care of people that they're legally required to take care of who show up at their room, at the emergency room, right?
Yeah.
So that's not an organized way of dealing with it. And we also shouldn't be just taking care of people when they are in a life or death scenario, because sometimes when they show up there, it is too late and they die of something that would have been caught earlier if they did have proper health insurance that allowed them to go to their doctor once a year for their checkups and get proper testing that gets done when they get a little bit sick and catch something early than when they come in and they're dying.
Yeah.
So again, it goes back to, it's not. I'm not in favor of big government, quote unquote. I don't want the government getting involved deeply in our personal lives and stuff like that. But big government should be focusing on solving big issues. And that's the thing, is that this is the national health care plan is a big issue. So, when it comes to taxes, it's kind of like everything else. I'm okay with paying taxes if I'm getting an adequate, if I'm getting a good return investment on that. So paying more in taxes in exchange for health care that's going to be better, and ultimately when you work it out, it's going to be less expensive for most people. I'm fine with that. And that's why I like Bernie's plan, is that but I also like Warren's plan. They're pretty similar. Um, but I think that Bernie's plan is a lot better than what we have now, because, yeah, we'd be paying more in taxes, but then we wouldn't have to be paying health insurance premiums or copays when we go in to get health care. You go in, you show your ID, and you get seen by a doctor. You might have to wait a little bit for certain things. But if we get into a situation where the problem we're having to solve is, okay, we need to find a way to hire more doctors for increased demand, that's a problem that's solvable, right? That's a much easier problem to solve than the ones that we're trying to solve currently.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I just saw that one clip,
Mm-hmm.
and and if it all works out, it works out. I just want people. I don't want. I don't want a situation to come up to where you may be forced to go into a plan instead of still being to shop around and look at different insurance instead of getting put in the plan that you're automatically paying for at paycheck.
Well, but so
And it may not be what you want.
I guess the question is, it's like, what is a real meaningful difference between one insurance plan versus another one? Like, there's a meaningful difference between organic peanut butter and Jif, right?
Yeah.
That, there's a meaningful difference in how the peanuts are farmed and raised and watered, and the way, and the types of chemicals that are used or not used in the soil and stuff like that's a meaningful difference that it matters to me as a consumer, or doesn't matter, right?
Yeah.
In terms of health insurance, what is the actual meaningful difference between one plan versus another? At the end of the day, what you care about is, I can go see the doctor that I want to see, and if the doctor prescribes me medication, that I can get that medication, or I can get whatever treatment was prescribed to me based on what my diagnosis is, right?
Mm-hmm.
So all healthcare plans should provide that. So if they're all providing that, what is the actual meaningful difference between one healthcare plan and another when you're comparison shopping?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I'm a little knowledgeable on this. I'm just not
Mm-hmm.
100%. I just know that I'm just more in favor of people maybe having a choice. But you know, if I heard more of Bernie's town hall, or more of what is, because I don't listen to a lot of Bernie Sanders,
Mm-hmm.
but then I might be more swayed. I mean, I kind of look at it the same way, like with my dental. I have dental insurance. I don't currently have health insurance right now, but I'm getting ready to through my job.
Mm-hmm.
I got to get to 9 months, which comes up in like a month or two. But I know my dental insurance, it's limited to where I can go and where I can't go, as far
Right.
as my doctor. So.
So if we went to a national plan, that wouldn't exist. That, as I understand it, that pretty much wouldn't exist. If it went to a Medicare for all, or it's probably more accurate to describe it as Medicaid for all, but he's using the terminology Medicare for all mainly because Medicare is something we're familiar with.
Hmm.
Um, the plan that he's proposed, as I understand it, is radically different. But basically, it's funded through. So there is a tax increase that's going along
Hmm.
with that. What you get in return is that everyone who's a U.S. citizen has health insurance through Medicare, um, and it expands the Medicare program and changes how it works. That way, when you need to see a doctor or when you want to you call, you make an appointment, you go in. There's no copay. There's no premium because the premium is essentially covered with your taxes. Uh, you get your any treatment medication prescribed, and then you go get your
Hmm.
medication. You can go see the doctor you want to see. You go see the dentist you want to see because without without competing private health insurance plans, then there all the doctors have to accept all the doctors and hospitals have to accept Medicare and Medicaid if they want, or if they want to have a practice, right? I guess there opens up the possibility, I think, for additional health insurance plans that only cover things like, you know, Botox injections if you want in your lips and stuff like that. I don't think that that's going to be covered through Medicaid, um, or Medicare. That that kind of stuff that's purely elective and and is not doesn't actually have a health component to it wouldn't necessarily be covered. Uh, so there would be, if you want coverage for additional procedures that aren't covered within the plan, then you would get it. But there wouldn't be a need for the difference that you're talking about with your dental insurance, where you pick between one plan or the other and it restricts which dentist you're going to go see. If someone's a dentist and they want to have any kind of practice, they better be accepting Medicare, right? Because otherwise they're not going to have any customers.
Yeah.
So I just think that that's a more organized thing. Like basically, it's like health insurance is a product that exists, that the very existence of it kind of demonstrates a flaw in the system. It's an unnecessary middleman that overcomplicates, that adds additional complication to the system. And and you're not an expert on it. I'm not an expert on it. We have to pay someone who's an expert on it and kind of take on faith that their opinion is correct,
Yeah.
or we take on faith that the government is acting in our best interest, which obviously it's not a given that the government is going to act in our best interest. It's our responsibility as citizens to maintain a check on them and pay attention to them and make sure that they're acting in our best interest and to vote them out of office when they're not,
Yeah.
or
It
demand that.
it all boils down to me really. If it's a good system, I'm like I said, I'm not in favor of like a big government coming in and kind of trying to tell you what to do, what or what you can't. But
Mm-hmm.
if it's a good system and it's well thought out and it's organized and it works, uh, I might warm up to it just a little bit more. Uh, I mean, but that's left to.
Yeah, I would definitely look more into it because that's a decision that's being put before us, the voters, right now, which is effectively that the competing plans are, there's Bernie's plan, Warren's plan, and then the other one that's out on the Democratic side is there's the concept of Medicare buy-in has been talked about, where that would be more, you keep Medicare kind of the way it is, but you open it up so that everyone can buy into it as a competing plan and the existing insurance market remains as it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's another option. That seems like something that would that would make it less expensive for rich people and more expensive for poor people. It doesn't really fix kind of the fundamental problem where you're still putting a cost barrier to access to healthcare.
Hmm. Yeah.
So I'm not a huge fan of that plan. On the Republican side of the aisle, I haven't seen a plan yet. They talk a lot about repealing the Affordable Care Act, which I agree has a lot of flaws to it.
Hmm.
It really strengthened the private health insurance market rather than um, making moves to get rid of it because of a lot of the compromises that were made
Hmm.
to try to um, bring. It was I think they made a lot of concessions to bring either try to make get some bipartisan support for it where they could, or to bring in more centrist Democrats. But it ended up that those compromises are ultimately what killed it. If they had the option to go with either single payer or to go with a public option, and they got rid of both of those in the rush to try to get something through. And what they got was um, private health insurance existed as it was. You still got it through your employer primarily, but they put in an individual mandate that everyone had to carry some insurance so that
Yeah.
everyone kind of went into the pool. The problem with that was that health insurance rates did increase because there were no price controls put in place on what health insurance companies could charge. And then when you're mandating the purchase of a product, that has constitutional issues. So that was what the whole Supreme Court case came into, and they have ultimately ended up ruling that it was a tax rather than a mandate to purchase something. And Congress does have the ability to levy taxes, and that was why it was declared constitutional. But obviously, as we've seen, there were openings, and the Republicans have been successful at chipping away at parts of the law and making it weaker, also because they left the whole idea of whether or not to set up exchanges or how to set up exchanges or whether or not to take the federal money that was supposed to help out poor folks with buying insurance. That was all left up to the state legislatures. So, like here in Missouri, our state legislature was able to just be like, "Nope, we're not going to take the federal money. We're going to do everything we can to make sure that this doesn't work. Who cares whether or not it would be better or worse for our citizens? We." Like it's that kind of part. It opened up the floor for a lot of partisan gamesmanship to undermine it. So that
Yeah.
it worked better in some states than it did in other states, and yeah, so that was clearly a flawed direction to go in. But the problem is that the Republicans have offered nothing other than, well, we're going to repeal it. Okay, so if you repeal it, do we go back to the way that things were, where insurance companies can just deny you coverage, period, if you have a pre-existing condition? That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense, because we already saw how bad that was, where people who have diabetes, they lose their job, they have it in, and they end up with a gap in insurance coverage, then they can't get health insurance, and then they're having to pay for their medication out of pocket. Obviously that doesn't work, because if you don't get the insulin, you die, or you end up in the insurance room in a critical case, and if you can't pay for that, then the bill gets passed on to, as we talked about, everyone else. That's why you need a national healthcare plan. Healthcare is something that everyone has to deal with, whether you like it or not. Eventually, these bodies we have are going to let us down in one way or another, or you're going to get sick in one way or another. So it's not like it's something that you can just kind of roll your dice and hope you're going to beat the odds on health.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the few issues I've had with Trump is he ever since he was campaigning, it was repeal and replace. And I'm like, what are you going to replace it with? Because I mean, it's all good. I mean, I think most people would say that the Affordable Care Act was, like that it was flawed. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
from the beginning.
Yeah.
But and and every time in one of his debates, they would be like, "Well, what are you going to replace it with?" And he would just kind of deflect, and because he did, I still don't think he has any idea.
Well,
But
he's
I
not
think
he's not really a details guy, is he? If we're
no,
being real.
I think just the pure statement as far as people that support him of going,
Mm-hmm.
yep, I'm going to repeal Obamacare, I'm going to repeal it, and it won in voters, and without having to really
Right.
explain what he was going to do.
And that's the frustrating thing for me as a guy who's voted for the Democrats my whole life is that we were very clear, I thought, on what we wanted when we elected Barack Obama. Is what we wanted was what he was campaigning on was a organized plan that would make an actual national health care plan. What we got was a bad compromise that had a lot of weaknesses in it that was very easy for the Republicans to attack. So it was frustrating for me on a number of levels. One, it was like I didn't stutter when I with what I was asking for, and I thought that was what you were campaigning on. What we end up getting was decidedly less than that. And then also because of those compromises, it didn't work as well, so it made very fertile ground for the Republicans to attack because it ended up costing more than people expected. Not everyone was able to keep their doctors the way that they had been promised, which that's what people really care about. People care about people didn't don't care so much about keeping the health insurance plan they have, right? People
Hmm.
do care about keeping the doctor that they see and that they know and they have built a relationship with. So when you change health insurance in a way where people are not necessarily able to continue seeing the same doctor that they built a relationship with, that's where they're going to be upset. If my insurance card changes from a Blue Cross Blue Shield card to an Anthem card to a Kaiser card to a Medicare card, I really don't care. If I have to stop, if I'm seeing Dr. Smith and now I'm having to see Dr. Jones, yeah, I'm going to care about that. If the government tells me, no, you can't see Dr. Smith, you have to see Dr. Jones, I will be upset with the government. But I'm not going to be upset if the name on the card changes, but I'm still able to see this my same doctor and my health care doesn't change in a meaningful way.
Yeah,
You know,
agreed on that.
and I mean, like under the system currently, you're right now. You're waiting till you get to the 9 month point with your job before you even get health insurance, right?
Yep.
My job, I just this past year, we were on one health plan. The board of directors decided that another health plan was better, but probably means cheaper for the company. So they switched us over to that. They didn't ask us; they just did it. Okay, that's without government run health. You know, at least with Medicare for all, it's consistent. It's not going to change. You're going to have the same stuff covered, and then there'll be debates in Congress about specific things, possibly of whether or not they should be covered by that, or if that's something to leave up to the private sector on whether or not to cover it. It's like I'm okay with that. That feels like a much better debate than what we have currently.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I, I'm gonna have to do some more research and and figure out what I feel is better and what I should be supporting and whatnot.
Mm-hmm.
I've just until I came to this job, the job I'm at now, I've just never really had to worry about health insurance. My job just always provided it. Uh, so I just wasn't as well educated on like healthcare. I
Right.
just felt myself, you know, because I'm only 25. So when I at my last job when I got insurance, I was 21.
Mm-hmm.
21, I was just thrilled to have insurance. So I didn't really uh, do much homework on it. But getting older and living on my own, you know, uh,
Yeah, well, because when you're growing up, it's not really something that that's it's theoretically at the forefront of your mind because you're always, or theoretically, you're supposed to be covered on your parents' health insurance plan until you're, you know, out on your own and getting it through an employer yourself, right?
yeah,
That was the whole idea, and that was one of the good things about, in keeping the current system that Barack Obama extended the age to 26 where you could stay on your parents' health insurance plan. I thought that was a
yeah,
good change.
hmm,
Um, but and that's the thing is that when the Republicans were looking at repealing it, it's like, okay, wait, when you get into the details of repealing it, are you repealing all these specific things that people actually liked? You're going to repeal the protection for people with pre-existing conditions? Well, people don't like that. So if you keep that in, and then you keep in, the other parts that people like staying on until you're 26 years old, being able to stay on your parents' plan until you're 26. People like that too.
Yeah.
Um, and then you start doing it, it's like, well, okay, no, we're only going to repeal the individual mandate. Okay, well, but if you repeal that, then everything fails, and the insurance company, everything else about the bill fails, and then you end up also damaging and killing the pieces of the legislation that people like. That was the thing, is that the whole deal was passed as a package. It was imperfect, but it did work better than the previous plan as a package, and it did achieve the goal of getting more people covered under health insurance, which means that they're under an organized system for healthcare as opposed to I just kind of coast on luck until I show up at an emergency room, and then if I can't afford it and don't have health insurance, then the hospital has to still give care anyway.
Yeah.
That's not really a good plan, and it's not, I also want to say, it's like, I'm not in any way demonizing people who make that decision. People who make that decision, it's not really a choice. They legitimately can't afford that additional cost with everything else. I don't think that there were a whole lot of people who were choosing, well, I could drive a Honda Civic, but I'm going to drive a Porsche, and I'm going to forego health insurance so I can drive a Porsche. I don't think that that's. I honestly don't think that there were a lot of people who were like making those kind of choices with it. It's you know, we've got an economy that generates a lot of money, but not everyone gets a share in it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, Trump's whole repeal on the place line, that always seemed to me kind of like with a lot of his stuff. That's a good, kind of like the same thing where Mexico was going to pay for the wall, which I think the wall's a terrible idea, but same kind of thing. It's like, yeah, that's a good line that gets you that's a line that gets you a cheer with that audience, but you don't actually have any hard policy wrapped around that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I mean, it's somebody who I didn't vote. I should have voted, but if I
Mm-hmm.
had, because I live in Indiana. Indiana was the first state to go for Trump, but I would have voted for him. But I wouldn't have voted for him because of some wall that he said Mexico was going to pay. Not that was I that it is what it is on the wall. I didn't care much for it or his plan of getting it down. I think everybody knew Mexico was never going to pay for that wall, and then he couldn't get the funding himself, so he had to pull a national security and the loophole was what get the money. So
Right, and it's a loophole that's only put in place because of the Patriot Act, right? It's the ability to declare a national emergency whenever he wants. It's like we're not in a national emergency. The only emergency that's been created down at the wall is because of how badly they've mishandled the changes that they've made with how people are treated when they come here asking for asylum at the border.
yeah,
His whole policy of we're just going to lock everyone up no matter what until they have a court date, and he's talking about that we shouldn't even have judges down there. It's like it's just ridiculous how badly it's been mishandled. So, but you said you would have voted for him anyway if you had voted. What were the key different? Now I was a Bernie Sanders guy more than Hillary Clinton, but I still voted for her when it came down to it. What were the key differentiating factors between where you felt that Trump was better than Hillary Clinton, and do those still hold true today?
um, one of the main factors I would have voted for him, and most people that I know voted for him was just he was, at least in this area, viewed as kind of like an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a lot of people, because most of Indiana and Kentucky, and it's rural, I live 5 minutes from Louisville, Kentucky, which is a big city. Outside of that, it's real rural, and I think a lot of people got tired of almost like that status quo. People around they got tired of all the PC going on, the political correctness. He
Mm-hmm.
was just an outsider, and what a lot of people felt what they felt needed to be said and whatnot. Uh, so I think that uh,
So let's dig into that a little bit. So first off, his status as an outsider. Do you think that he's meaningfully changed the culture of corruption that existed in Washington with his appointees to his cabinet, or any of the changes that he's made while he's been there?
um probably not substantially, maybe a little, but substantially. I or not substantially, minor in a minor way.
Can you point to anything where he's actually addressed the corruption issue? Because I mean, like putting folks like Steve Mnuchin in charge of the Treasury and putting like folks like G. Pai who in charge of the FEC, who then goes and unwinds the net neutrality laws. That would seem to be measurably worse than what existed before, rather than better. He's literally putting it's almost like a Saturday Night Live skit where you think of who's the worst person to head this agency, because we're concerned because the previous job they held that they would have corrupt interest and undermine what the agency is supposed to do in the name of the American people, and then he's putting those people in charge of it. That would seem to me the opposite of draining the swamp. It's making it the swamp even worse than it was before.
um, I don't think it would have. I'm not hated is and a lot some of his moves. I mean, I follow the, uh, but I know that I don't. It's I know that it's not as corrupt as I think if Hillary made. I hated or not hated. Hate is a strong word, but I strongly disliked Hillary from the beginning, and then uh,
Mm-hmm.
and then that email stuff came out, and then it the optics of that just seemed it reeked of maybe not corruption, but
No, I'll agree. The
more
optics were
power.
terrible. I agree
Yeah,
with
more
that.
power than she should have had at that point.
The optics were
But
indisputably terrible on that, and she wasn't her personality is not the warm, approachable, likable one on the
yeah,
campaign trail. Like she may have that aspect to her, but it
mm,
definitely did not show through the campaign. She wasn't particularly good at showing that side of her personality on the campaign trail. I do think that there is a bit of a double standard that women face when they run for political office, where if they're nice, they're kind of pushed to the side by men who attempt to strong arm them,
yes,
and if they play at that game, they're accused of being shrill or uncivil
yeah,
and all kind of like that. So they're put. That being said, again, I wasn't necessarily a fan of Hillary Clinton. I thought that was a bad direction in a number of ways for the Democratic Party to go, and it was not the it's not the direction that again, I support Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, that type. I think that that's the direction our country should be going in. It should be going away from the corruption. I did not like her ties to Wall Street. Obviously, some of the things that were exposed when the Russians hacked the Democratic National Committee's emails clearly showed, if not illegality, definitely stuff that didn't look good and was unethical, if not illegal.
yeah,
That was done in an effort to skew the primary towards her. Clearly,
mm,
that was a bad play on their part. Now, whether or not that information should have gotten to us, the way that it got to us was a foreign government hacking their servers and distributing that to the general public through WikiLeaks. That's another that's another part of it. But at the end of the day, when the truth came out, that's the truth, and we take that in. The thing that I have issue with is that okay, that stuff's bad, but you got to weigh that in context with what was happening on the other side, which you had a guy who bragged about, again, it was he was caught in a private moment, but when you're talking about her emails, that stuff that they thought they were saying outside of the public eye, when he's bragging about using his celebrity status to get away with grabbing women by their private parts, that's also something that he's saying when he thinks that the mic's not on in terms of being in front of the public eye, but is very much a genuine statement on his part. I don't think that that's a good thing either. And then, the things that he would do, that he's admitted to and said that he would do, by going into the girls' dressing rooms during beauty contests when they were changing. That's not good either. So when you weigh and stack that up, I agree that Hillary Clinton had a lot of flaws, but Donald Trump, I think, was measurably worse. And I do think that a lot of people, there's a lot of outrage at the system because we have been in this country been failed by our politicians and the way that this system works, where the big corporations and the rich and powerful can buy access to our politicians and get their needs met before the rest of our needs in the general public were met. I'm completely sympathetic to that, but we need to be a little bit more discerning in when we choose who we're going to send to combat that issue as to if it's someone who's genuine, because someone like Donald Trump, in my estimation, is basically just a con man. They might tell you, oh, hey, no, I'm going to fight for you, but I think we've seen he's clearly just gone and used that office to work to get stuff for himself, and it's all about his aggrandizement. He doesn't really seem to really care about the American people at all, genuinely, as much as no matter what he says, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of Trump he is concerned more about getting it more with the power struggle. I think he likes. I think that power struggle of this side said I can't do it, but I'm going to do it. I just something. It's almost a narcissistic way. Is he? I get off on it. That power struggle and
Mm-hmm.
coming out on top of a debate or coming out on top of a situation, and because when that happens and when he comes out on top, it's all over social media. He can't stop
Right.
talking about it. But
well, he uses Twitter so much more.
Yeah, that's another thing too. I've said right from the get-go, he needs to shut his mouth on Twitter.
It doesn't work well. JC Motorsports brings up all the jobs he's made by deregulation. I don't think that he's actually created any jobs through deregulation. There are a few. The economy was growing when Obama left office, and it's kind of continued on the same trend. I haven't seen any jobs that have specifically been added through deregulation of industry that you can clearly say would not have been added through the normal course of the way that things were going anyway as the economy picked back up steam. The tax cut, yeah.
I know he came to Indiana. Oh hell, I can't remember when it was. But there was a company. I think it was Carrier.
Mm-hmm. I remember this. Yeah,
an air conditioning company, and he visited them or whatever, and it was like not even a few days later, and they were like, "Nope, we're staying."
Right, but didn't they end up shipping those jobs anyway at the end of the day? Like he came in and talked to them, and they said that they weren't that they were going to stay instead of going. So there were a handful of jobs that were saved there, but I thought that they ended up leaving again anyway.
If they did, I haven't heard about it.
Yeah, I don't actually remember what happened with that, but
yeah, I if they did, I didn't hear about it, but they very may have.
Yeah,
but
so that's look. I'm glad that those people ended up holding on to their jobs. I think that's a good thing. But I do, if you look at the way that the economy's, yeah. So I got to look more at that one again. But I thought I did remember that they ended up turning back around and shipping some jobs away anyway. I thought GM ship some as well too. You know, and look, I agree. The North American Free Trade Agreement was not a good deal for American workers at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the whole ability of companies to just kind of shift things around and move manufacturing to the places where they could get the cheapest labor, that hasn't
Mm-hmm.
worked for working class Americans. People who,
Yeah.
it used to be that you could have a manufacturing job that would make a middle class living and provide for, a house and food and all the things that you needed to get by, and that has changed over time. The American middle class has been destroyed by a whole lot of other stuff. I don't think that deregulating the very industries that are getting rid of those jobs for profit, giving them more leeway to do whatever they want, is not going to address that issue. It's just going to deregulating them is only going to allow them to further act in their own interests for whatever will make profits for them and their shareholders. That's not going to create jobs. What would create jobs would be actual infrastructure spending, or and working on repairing the country's infrastructure, building high-speed rail, things like that. Those are some meaningful things that could create jobs. Building,
Mm-hmm.
building, working on converting buildings to use green energy solutions, or converting power plants over to green energy solutions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and as far as like the energy solutions stuff goes, as far as me, I was never, I'm not one of those, got to burn natural fuel. If we can find something that is viable enough as like
Mm-hmm.
solar energy and wind energy, I'm all for it. I'm not one of those people that, because Trump says he campaigns for the coal miners, and that it's just not that fossil fuel. It's just not going to last forever. I mean,
Well,
we
it's
got to.
not going to last forever, and the reality is with the coal mining industry, he's campaigning for the owners of the coal mines. Those coal mining jobs haven't come back.
Yeah,
Um,
and as far as my political views, and I say I would have voted for Trump, but that doesn't mean I'm like far right wing. I'm more in the
mm-hmm.
middle. I see takes from both sides, and I remember back in high school or whatever, in my government class, our teacher had us put down. Uh, it was like a line chart, and it was like Democrat, Republican, and it had the middle line. Where would you put yours? And I just put mine right in the middle because I label myself independent. I just kind of take it as it goes. So I see both sides. I'm not just like
Yeah,
one.
I just really think that the left-right divide is often a false dichotomy that gets put forward, and it's something that serves to divide us and keep us from
Yeah,
actually talking about the details of the
yeah.
individual issues. So I'm not
The
a big fan of I'm not a big fan of simplifying the political debate to just this binary right-left thing, because
yeah,
that puts people more on, like, I got to argue for my team rather than looking at the details of the individual policy. We got Jay. I'm assuming it's Jay Collins of JC Motorsports. You're right. When I looked at the replay, man, there was a full car with that was one of the biggest net codes I've ever seen. So I'm apologize to you for going off on the mic. When I went back and looked at it, it was not your fault at all, man. You're fine. I was frustrated, so I apologize on that.
I've done the same thing, man.
Yeah.
I've yelled at somebody, and it ended up being huge net.
Well, the thing was, when the netcode happens from your perspective in the car, it literally looks like the other person's car just jumps right up into you and
Yeah,
and knocks you. And like the way that my car reacted, it sent me all the way up towards the wall. But when you go back and look, I went back and looked at it on the replay, and if you watch the video, you'll see it on the replay when I'm going back and looking through it. It was it was literally a car width between them. So here's the thing with the coal mining jobs coming back and all that. There's a reason that the coal mining industry was regulated. It was because the people who own the coal mines were taking advantage of their workers and putting them in unsafe working conditions where they get black lung disease and things like that. You go down and you work and you'd come out, they would pay you as little as they could. They didn't care about safety. They didn't care about coal miners dying and stuff like that. The regulations were put in place to make the working conditions safer for the workers. If you repeal the working conditions, yes, people go back to work, but then they're just going to go back and work in that unsafe place where they're dying. It's like I feel like we've moved past from that as a society where it doesn't have to be dangerous. And the thing is that a lot of the coal mining now, if we're going to keep getting our for that, we've got robots and stuff like that. There's just less work for actual humans to do in that type of industry than there is um, than there used to be. The technology has moved on past that point,
Yeah.
and it's always unfortunate when you've established a way of making a living and then technology automates that particular job out of existence. That's unfortunate, but going back to the old way where someone owns a mine, um, exploiting people who are in poverty for their lives to make more money for themselves is not an equitable way of doing it. So I absolutely agree with you. People need to work. 100% agree with you on that. But we need to find better sustainable things for that rather than just going back to the old ways of working that didn't do it. Um, I
What do
agree
you
with
think about
yeah,
what do you think about what's his name? He's a Democratic candidate. The Asian guy, Andrew.
Andrew Yang.
Yeah. What do you think about his plan of that $1,000? Uh,
The universal basic income, the freedom dividend.
yeah.
I actually do like a lot the concept of the universal basic income. I I like a lot of the things that he's saying, and I think that he's framing some things about that in the right way, which is that the reality is that a lot of our jobs are, I think the way that what he said is that there are only 8% of jobs that are not at risk of being automated out of existence in the next 20 years. I
Yeah.
mean, the trucking industry is the one that he emphasizes a lot as being at particular risk in the very near future. And I agree with him on the ultimate concept, which is when people are put out of work through no fault of their own other than technology has evolved to a point that they're going to be pushed out of work entirely. You need we need to come up with something as a society so that those people aren't just kicked out onto the streets and
Yeah.
left to fend for themselves.
Hmm.
Um, the problem that I have with the freedom dividend is in the details as I understand it in terms of how it's being implemented, which is that
Hmm.
it seems to be being put in place of, hey, we're going to give you $1,000 a month and then use that as an excuse to cut a lot of other services that the government provides,
Hmm.
which still ends up being a raw deal at the end of the day for poor people. Also, his way of paying for it through a consumption tax. Consumption taxes, like sales taxes, are inherently regressive, which means that they take a higher percentage of the income of poor people than they do rich people.
Hmm.
$1,000 a month isn't enough to live on. It's still only $12,000 a year, so you're not getting enough to live on. So if you lost your job, okay, you're getting $12,000 a year. That's better than nothing, but that's still not making up for the a full-time income that you can live on.
Yeah.
And then the other part that I really don't like, as I understand it, is that if you're getting disability now, you would have the choice of either collecting your disability insurance or you are or you have a choice of collecting the freedom dividend, but you can't get both. I do want to address the two things that were said in chat here by JC Motorsports. Says he's a conservative. He loves what Trump's done. That's fine. That's your opinion. Obama killed the economy. Trump brought it back. That is factually incorrect. The recession and the crash of the stock market happened at the end of the Bush presidency, not Obama. And the it took a while under the Obama administration, but Obama's some of Obama's I'm not a fan of some of the things that Barack Obama did, but the reality is that the recovery started under Obama, not under Trump. The economy crashed under the Bush presidency. The recovery started under the Obama presidency. That's just a fact. You can look at a timeline or a graph and you can see that. I don't like abortion either. I'm not in favor of killing children at all. But first off, I wanted to say the whole thing that Trump's been saying about that babies are born and then there's a decision between the doctor and the mother about whether or not to kill a healthy baby doesn't happen. That doesn't exist. That does not exist. No, it's not happening anywhere. Um, the abortion issue is extremely complicated, and I want to hear your opinions on this, David, as well. But for me, when you talk about big government and getting involved in people's lives, I don't want big government inside of women's bodies deciding what goes on in there. Um, the effective ways to prevent abortions are through better uh, education around, better sex education and uh, getting people better educated about proper methods of birth control. Um, trying to, just saying that nope, we're just going to tell people not to have sex. That's unrealistic. Human beings are going to have sex. They've been having sex ever since. And outlawing abortion, all that's going to do is that for women who are going to seek an abortion, it's just going to drive them into underground means and put their health at greater risks. Um, Generally speaking, most abortions happen early term when they're by choice. I think that women should have a grace period where they find out that they're pregnant to make a decision about whether or not they want to carry that baby to term. I don't think that the government should be involved in forcing every woman to carry every pregnancy all the way to term. And then when it comes to later term abortions, generally speaking, those are again very difficult decisions where a woman had decided that she wanted to carry the baby, and then as through the course of the pregnancy, her doctors find out that continuing the pregnancy all the way to term is either going to have a great deal of health risk to her, or that the baby's not going to make it, and is going to be born with defects that are horribly severe that it's just not going to survive. Um, but again, those decisions are ones that should be left to the parents and the doctors, and that the government shouldn't have any say in it. That's my opinion on that. I ultimately want less abortions, and again, the way to less abortions is not by outlawing it. The way to less abortions is through better education, in my opinion.
I mean, I agree for the most part. That grace period that you were talking about, I feel maybe under some circumstances, maybe if a woman gets raped or it gets assaulted in some way or another. But if it's, to me, if it's a woman and a boyfriend and they accidentally get pregnant, I still don't think you should be able to get divorced. I think it was consensual and it was an act, but consensual. So I'm on the side of you got to kind of live with it.
Well, what if it wasn't a consensual act?
Well, that's what I was saying. If it was rape or if it was an assault of some kind, then yeah, you can have the abortion. But as far as say two people that have been together for a couple years and they both consented to having sex and something accidentally happens, I just don't see that's a viable reason to
Well, but
get an abortion.
what if they weren't together for 2 years? What if it was a one night hookup and they thought that pulling out was a viable means of birth control, and the guy didn't leave his phone number, but it was consensual sex?
Um, I,
The
I think
point
you should have. I think in that case, I think you should have to carry it.
you should be forced to carry it to term, and the woman who she might be 21, she might be 18, she might be 15, has to cover the entire cost of raising the kid.
I mean, you could give it up for adoption. I mean, that's always an option. I just feel like giving a child up for adoption uh, is better than one. It's better than being with a parent that doesn't want it,
I agree.
and it's also, in my opinion, it's better than just terminating it.
I agree
Because
too, but that's a personal choice. That's something that that again we're in the area of belief. I feel like as opposed to legality. It's
yeah,
two different things. I agree. I personally am never. I'm not a fan of abortion. I think that in general that we should that life is precious and we should protect it. But that's that for me is more of it is a philosophical or religious debate as to whether and where life begins
hmm
as opposed to an objective legal one. And the thing is, again, kind of like just like the issue with with homosexuality, it's like, yeah, there are certain people who believe that homosexuality is wrong, but that's your
hmm
belief. If you don't believe in gay marriage, you don't get gay married. That's fine. But when you come into making laws that regulate what other people can do with their body or regulate what who other people can and can't marry, that's where I have a problem. Especially
yeah,
when they're talking about actually, because again, I'm glad that some people are actually being honest about this. But when you're talking about actually convicting, uh, trying and convicting women and doctors as under felony first degree murder, which again, at least they're being honest about the end consequences of what the legislation is they're trying to put forth. I'm not okay with that. Are you okay with so let's go to the most extreme end of that, and then we can try walking it back in terms of that. But like, um, woman has sex, it's a one night stand, or it's not. We use the situation of 2-year committed relationship, okay? And after having sex, go in the bathroom and find that the condom broke or was leaky, right?
hmm
Woman goes out and buys the morning after pill.
hmm
Are you okay with her going away for 25 years to life?
no,
Okay.
not that,
So,
or
but
not
but
that.
but she
You
just
know,
terminated a pregnancy
um, I don't
potentially.
think I don't think life happens that early, like the
So
day after.
so okay, so but that's conception, right? If you're taking the morning after pill, you're making a decision to, if I'm pregnant, I'm going to terminate it right now.
Yeah.
How is that
Um.
different from doing it 3 months later when it's a
Uh.
bundle of
I think because at 3 months, the baby is already starting to really kind of develop because the night after it may be conception, but it, the baby is still. I mean, it's just, maybe a handful of stuff that. To me, that's not really work. I mean, life is life. I mean, as long if the cells are alive, it's alive. But
mm-hmm.
uh, I just to taking the morning after pill is a little different for me. I think that should be okay. But I did that full on, like, you find out 8 weeks down the road that you're pregnant. By then you can almost you can hear a heartbeat almost. So
Right, but
uh,
scientists have shown that you can manufacture something that looks like a heartbeat. That still doesn't mean you have a viable life form that can sustain on its own without the assistance of another uh, entity. And that's the thing, is that this is something men never have to deal with because we're not the ones our bodies are not the way that the bargain works. We don't have to carry pregnancy to term. It's something we never have to deal with. So why
yeah,
are men so concerned about dictating to women what they can do with their body for a 9-month period because of something that was an unintended mistake? When the
yeah,
man doesn't have to bear any doesn't no man ever has to worry about ever having to take care to bring a pregnancy, even if you're going to give it up for adoption, that's 9 months where, from your perspective, it's an unwanted pregnancy. That's a life form that you don't want, that's going to be living in you. That the scientific term for that, and it's going to sound harsh because of the way that would be a parasite. That's, if you're an unwanted life form, you're a parasite until you're out, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so again, I don't, in my beliefs, I do believe that life is precious and stuff like that, but I also believe that the life of the mother matters, or the life of the woman in this regard matters. And the reality is that when it comes to U.S. law, you're not a U.S. citizen until you're born on U.S. soil or to U.S. parents or become naturalized, right?
Yep.
Now, we do have some pieces of the law where, and again, this is in desired pregnancies where the woman has decided that she's going to carry forth, and if you kill the mother, then it's counted as a double murder. And I think that's fair. The family has made a decision that this is going to be, that they're going to be welcoming in a new member to their family.
Yeah.
That's a different story. So killing the mother also means killing the child, and
Mm-hmm.
if in this case, if the father is the one who survives, he lost two people that were going to be part of his life rather than losing one.
Mm-hmm.
I see Zwane. Thank you for the follow. Much appreciated. Welcome to the family. So that piece is different, but the thing is that when you're going to make a blanket statement, are we also going to shift the law to where it's not, your citizenship is not granted at birth, it's granted at conception?
Mm-hmm.
So couples vacationing in America for a week, they have sex, and the baby is conceived there. Is that baby now a U.S. citizen?
If the parents are not citizens, but
Parents
they're
are
in
not
America,
citizens. Let's say that they're vacationing in America for a week from France or Canada or Mexico.
then no, the baby's not a U.S. citizen, in my opinion.
So how
As
does the
long
baby?
as it's not
So
born,
how does the baby have legal protection rights to be, uh,
The force is strong in this
the you know, in terms of protecting its life at the expense of the mother's life if it's not a citizen under U.S. law?
can you repeat that question? I'm sorry, I was doing it
Yeah,
on my phone.
sorry, I was getting a follow notification too, which thank you for that follow. So the question is, how are you going to grant legal protective rights under the law, uh, safety wiener, thank you for the follow, to someone who's not a U.S. citizen? If it's not a legal citizen, it doesn't have legal status, then how are you going to grant it legal protections at the expense of the mother's decisions and her rights to decide what she wants to do with her own body?
I mean, like if we're going off the example, the couple from France, I mean, wouldn't they just go back to France? I mean, if they had sex in America,
But I'm talking,
then
but we're bringing back in the U.S. citizen, so it's someone who's still living in America, right?
mm-hmm.
Woman finds out, because again, remember, period goes on 4 to 6 to 8 week cycle, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times you don't find out that you're pregnant. The first clue is you miss a period, so you're minimum 4 weeks in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes the period just you've had a girlfriend for a decent amount of time now. You know that the period's not just like steady on a clock, right?
Yeah.
It's sometimes later, it's sometimes, it's not
Yeah.
a defined set thing like a watch, right?
Yeah.
So when you're drawing a line, and I agree, second after the second trimester and stuff like that, absolutely, the extreme you got to have made up your mind at
Yeah.
some point before then.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to just being, it's like, oh, nope, I don't want this.
Yeah. Too late.
Right. There does come to be a certain point where it's
Yeah.
like, no, now you've got this thing that actually has some conscience and consciousness and is aware of what's being done to it. At this
Yeah.
point, you need to carry it to term and put it up for adoption if your financial situation has changed. That's a different story. And
Mhm.
in that case, we should also provide you some government assistance if your decisions, the reason for changing your mind about whether or not you're going to be able to raise this child are purely economic decisions. There should be some government assistance that comes in and helps you out through that period, if that's going to be the way. It needs to be a holistic plan, not just solely putting it on the individual's responsibility to deal with in that case.
Yeah.
If we're telling you what to do, we also need to pick up the other end of the bargain of helping out if you're not able to do it on your own. I actually just lost track of where the question was on that. But so that's why if you're at 3 months in, just because you can detect a heartbeat doesn't mean that it's a fully formed child yet. There's still a lot of things to go through. So that's why I'm in the mind of because we're dealing with human beings here and human beings aren't robots. You need time to realistically find out and determine that you're pregnant.
Mhm.
You need time to grapple with that and not be forced into making a knee-jerk decision one way or the other.
Mhm.
So that's why I think that there does need to be some time built into law to account for the fact that these are human beings that we're talking about, and not every human being believes in the same religious definitions of where life begins that everyone else does, right?
Yeah.
We don't have a national religion. We don't we practice freedom of religion. Everyone's free to practice religion or no religion as they see fit. So
Mhm.
making decisions for what everyone in the United States has to do based on what one religion says about when life starts, to me, seems unconstitutional and not a good path to go down when we're trying to make a country that works for everyone. Again, when we're talking about federal law and in the degree to which it has um, with with deciding things that are equitable for all citizens. That's where I come onto it. I have my personal beliefs about, and again, it's always a case by case basis. I would prefer there to be less abortions. I think in a just society, you would have less abortions. The solution to it is working to make the society more just and equitable for everyone, so that people are not put into these strapped financial decisions where they really feel like that if they have a child, they're not going to be able to take care of it. That
Yeah.
that work on that part of the problem, and you're going to have less abortions, rather than just saying nope, too bad, you can't have one. For me, that's the appropriate way to address that issue, in my opinion, not outlawing it and turning more people into criminals.
Yeah. I, I what we need is I think we need more qualified to make the better make the decision
Mm-hmm.
than men, because at the end of the day, like you said, it is their body. And the great thing about America is everybody can have their own opinion. Everybody can have their own religion. I'm not particularly a religious person,
Mm-hmm.
but most of my opinions on things are not religion based. They're just how I personally feel.
Right.
But I'm in no. That's just how I feel about abortion and about other stuff. But I am in no position to tell people what they can't do. I think I try to leave that up to qualified people, but I'll give my opinion, when it's asked or when needed. But qualified people need to make that decision.
Yeah.
I think everybody's in favor of less abortions. I don't think there's anybody out there advocating. A week before the baby's going to be born. Nope, don't want it. So get it out of me. I
Right.
don't think there's anybody out there advocating for that. It's up to everybody. Abortion's a tricky one because of
It
the religious aspect.
Exactly. That's the thing. It's clearly a very difficult issue. It's one that's not discussed in the detail or nuance that it needs to be discussed. This is where our news media, I think, lets us down a lot. Is that, especially in the TV news media, it's not discussed in the way that we're discussing it here.
Yeah.
It's discussed in on Fox News. They do just blatantly call Democrats baby killers just over and over and over again with no remorse, and you know, and on and you know on the on you know more liberal networks and stuff like that, it's like, nope, this is women's rights. They get to do whatever they want, with no discussion or appreciation for the complexity and or not always no discussion, but generally speaking, things don't go into the depth of complexity on the issue. And there are a lot of people on the Democratic side who when you get the strand who get shouted down for expressing the opinion that I have, where I'm like, you know what, I don't like that abortions happen, but I still think it should be the woman's choice. Even that can get shouted down sometime, although that's more very much fringe. I do think that there is a more nuanced discussion that's happening on the left on this issue than on the right, and part of the reason we continue to have to grapple with it is that the right has been fairly successful in defining this very clearly as a wedge issue, that to get people who vote on it as a single issue, as that's their issue. They're going to vote for the folks who are anti-abortion, no matter what.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So yeah, but I think that's actually a pretty good place to end. Do you have any last thoughts that you wanted to add on that?
Nope, not real.
All right, man. Well, David, it has been a pleasure hanging out and chatting with you. Appreciate you taking the time out of your day to hang out. This will be put up on YouTube on Monday. So, yeah. Good stuff, man. Thank you as well for, I see you in chat pretty regularly, so appreciate the support on that front. And hopefully I can get my iRating back up to where I'm in your split again on on NIS Saturdays.
Yeah, I like
and see you on the track, man.
Every time I race with you, I have a good time. So
I try.
Get back up there, or maybe I'll fall down. Who knows?
Who knows? Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully I can build it back up. We'll see.
Yeah. Hopefully we're up both about 4,500 before too long.
That'd be nice. Yeah, I need to. The only reason why I really care about it really is just a number, but the one reason why I do want to try to make a push to get it up there is that looking at Road to Pro next year, you don't have a realistic chance of making the top 20 in that if you're not in the top couple splits or the top split. So that's kind of why I'm looking at it as needing it. But at the end of the day, it's all for fun anyway.
I look at iRace because I like to race against the best. So.
Exactly. That's how you're getting better. You only get better by racing against the best. Mm-hmm. So thank you much, man. You have a good one.
All right, you too, man. I got to get to a derby. So.
All right. Well, peace out, guys. Take care.
All right. Talk to y'all later. Thanks.
If you like this video, click the like button. Hit subscribe. Head over to twitch.tv/John__Click the heart to give me a follow. David, any shout-outs that you want to do before on the tail end here?
I just want to shout out my buddy Garrett, my brother Chris. We're on a team together in a league we run, and we put in a lot of practice this year. I ended up winning the championship Tuesday, and I want to thank them. I just want to thank everybody.
Awesome deal, man. Congrats to you.
All right, thanks, man.
Thanks. Take care.
All right, you too. Bye.
Peace out, y'all.